The calm before the kindness. It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon. The sky was soft and gray, the kind of sky that made you slow down and look up. The streets of New Orleans were busy but not chaotic. Artists painted near Jackson Square, musicians played slow jazz on street corners, and tourists walked with curiosity and cameras. No one expected to see Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock walking side by side, laughing like old friends, unnoticed by most, at least for a little while. Keanu wore a plain black hoodie and jeans, his signature beard scruffy, his face half hidden under a baseball cap. Sandra wore oversized sunglasses and a long beige coat that swayed gently with every step. They looked like two regular people enjoying a peaceful stroll. No cameras followed them. No security hovered nearby, just the quiet rhythm of footsteps and friendship. They had decided to meet in the city for a small reunion. It had been years since they'd worked together. Their bond was never about fame or headlines. It was about shared struggles, mutual respect, and the rare understanding that comes with living under the spotlight but choosing humility. As they walked, they passed a young boy sitting alone near a street vendor. His clothes were torn, his backpack too thin for the cold breeze. He had a cardboard sign that read, "Trying to get my mom home. She's sick, need help." His eyes weren't begging. They were tired, hollow, filled with a silence louder than any cry. Keanu stopped walking. Sandra noticed and turned around. He knelt beside the boy and asked gently, "Hey, what's your name?" The boy blinked, startled. He looked up, unsure if he should answer. "Eli," he said finally, barely louder. Then a whisper. Keanu nodded slowly. "Eli, where's your mom now?" Sandra asked, kneeling too. "In the shelter down the street," Eli replied. "She had surgery. We lost our place. I'm trying to get her a ride to my aunt's house 3 towns away." He held out a wrinkled piece of paper with a number written in blue ink. It was a contact name. Martha, his aunt. Keanu's eyes didn't leave the boy's face. "Do you have enough to eat?" he asked. "Not really," Eli replied, hugging his knees. Sandra stood up and walked to the street vendor. She bought 2 warm meals, handed one to Eli, and sat beside him on the curb. Keanu sat on the other side. No cameras, no announcements. Just 3 people sharing a meal in silence. Minutes passed. More people walked by, some stopping to take photos of the celebrities, others too busy to notice the moment happening at their feet. But Keanu and Sandra didn't flinch. They weren't there for attention. They were there for Eli. After eating, Eli explained how his mom lost her job after getting sick. The surgery had drained their savings. They had no car. The hospital gave them shelter for 3 nights, and today was the last day. Eli had spent all morning asking for help, but people either ignored him or dropped coins without speaking. Keanu reached into his pocket and took out his phone. He called the number on the paper. After a few rings, a woman answered. Her voice was cautious at first, then shaky when Keanu calmly explained the situation. She confirmed she was Eli's aunt and had space for them both. She just had no way to get them there. Keanu looked up and said, "I can take you." Sandra looked at him and smiled quietly. Eli's eyes widened. "You'd do that?" "Absolutely," Keanu said. But that was just the beginning. What none of them knew was that someone had been recording from across the street. A woman with a stroller had paused to film the scene, not for drama, but because she recognized what was happening was rare. 2 celebrities, strangers to this child, were not performing. They were simply being human. The video went viral that evening. By the next day, millions had watched it. But what the internet didn't know, what cameras missed, was everything that happened after that ride began. And that is where the real story unfolds. The road they never planned. The car ride started in silence, but not the uncomfortable kind. It was the kind of silence that held weight, the kind that let people think, breathe, and just be. Keanu Reeves was behind the wheel of a rented SUV. He didn't like limos or fancy cars. Sandra Bullock sat in the passenger seat, occasionally, turning around to smile at Eli, who clutched his worn backpack like it was a life jacket keeping him afloat. As the city street slowly turned into open highway, the boy finally spoke. "You're not like the others." Keanu glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Others? The ones who walk by? Or the ones who only help if there's a camera?" Eli said. Keanu smiled faintly, eyes still on the road. "Well, we're not here to impress anyone." Sandra nodded. "Sometimes doing the right thing means nobody sees it, but it still matters." Eli leaned back, watching trees blur past his window. The world outside seemed to move too fast, like it didn't care what he'd been through, but inside the car time slowed. The seats were warm, the voices were kind, and for the first time in weeks he didn't feel invisible. They drove in shifts. When Keanu got tired, Sandra took the wheel. When Eli got drowsy, they let him rest with a blanket Sandra kept in the back seat. They stopped for food, not just fast food, but a warm diner where the waitress gave Eli free pie when she saw his tired eyes. She didn't recognize Keanu or Sandra. She just said, "You two seem like good people," and walked away. After lunch, the conversation deepened. Eli told them about his mom. Her name was Janet. She used to work as a school nurse, but when the pandemic hit, things fell apart. First came the pay cuts, then the health issues, then eviction. She never complained, Eli said, even when she couldn't walk without pain. She'd sing him to sleep with a hoarse voice and promise everything would be okay, even when he could. See the fear in her eyes. "She's stronger than anyone," Eli said, his voice thick. Keanu nodded. "Sounds like a warrior." Sandra wiped her eye discreetly. "Mothers like her carry the world on their backs and still find time to smile." Eli gave a half smile. "She always says kindness is the only thing no one can take from you." That made Keanu quiet for a long moment. He gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, like those words had grabbed something deep inside him. As the sky began to turn golden orange, the SUV climbed a quiet back road lined with tall trees. They were getting close to Eli's aunt's place. The GPS said 15 minutes. Then they saw the smoke. Thick, black smoke rising above the tree line. Sandra sat upright. "Is that—" Keanu slowed down. "Let's check it out." They turned down the next dirt road. Soon they saw it. A small one-story home surrounded by dry grass. A shed next to it was on fire. The flames were high, licking the edge of a fence. A woman stood nearby, yelling into a phone with one hand, holding a garden hose with the other. Her efforts were useless against the growing fire. Keanu jumped out of the car. "Call 911 again," he shouted. The woman, Martha, looked up, confused, and panicked. Sandra ran to her. "Are you okay? Is anyone inside?" "No, just me," Martha cried. "But it's spreading fast." Keanu grabbed the hose and aimed it at the dry grass while Sandra grabbed blankets from the car to smother the edge of the flames. Eli ran to his aunt and hugged her, nearly knocking her over. She dropped to her knees and held him tight, sobbing. As fire engines finally roared in the distance, the firefighters took over. The shed burned down, but the house was saved. When things settled, Martha sat on the porch shaking Eli by her side. She looked at Keanu and Sandra and said, "I don't know who you are or why you helped us, but thank you." Keanu shrugged. "We were just passing by," Sandra smiled. "Sometimes the road takes you exactly where you're needed." As they got ready to leave, Eli ran to Keanu. "Will I ever see you again?" Keanu crouched down. "Maybe not in person, but anytime you help someone else like this, that's me. That's us. Okay?" Eli nodded hard. Keanu stood and looked at Sandra. "Ready?" he asked. She took one last look at the boy hugging his aunt, the fire truck lights fading in the background, and whispered, "Yeah, let's go." But before they could take a single step back to the car, a black truck pulled up fast. Too fast. Tires screeched. A man jumped out. He wasn't smiling. And that was when everything changed again. The shadow behind the kindness, the man who jumped out of the black truck looked like a storm walking on two legs. Tall, heavy-built, with a jaw clenched so tightly it seemed it might snap. His boots hit the gravel with a thud that echoed in the air, still thick with the smell of smoke. He wore a flannel shirt half unbuttoned, revealing a tank top underneath, and his fists were already curled as if he had stepped out of that truck ready for a fight. "What the hell's going on here?" he shouted, voice loud enough to cut through the stillness. Everyone turned. Martha froze mid-hug. Eli took a step back. Keanu stepped forward slowly, placing himself between the man and the family. "Sir, is there a problem?" he asked calmly, voice like warm steel, gentle, but firm. The man pointed at Martha. "This is my land, my shed, and I'm going to sue the whole lot of you if I don't get an explanation." Martha looked stunned. "Your shed? You sold this place to my brother 5 years ago." "I sold the house," the man snapped. "But the land, read the fine print. The shed and half that yard still belongs to me. And now it's ash." Keanu narrowed his eyes, trying to stay composed. He'd seen people like this before. Bitter, entitled, fueled more by ego than truth. But it wasn't his place to argue. Over property lines, not yet. "The fire was already burning when we arrived," Keanu said. "We helped stop it from spreading to the house." The man scoffed. "Yeah? Or maybe you lit it to play hero. Wouldn't be the first time someone staged a scene for attention." That made Sandra step forward. "Are you serious?" she said, voice tight with disbelief. "We spent hours helping a sick woman's son reach his aunt. We almost ran into that fire ourselves." The man's eyes flicked to her. For a moment, his arrogance faltered. It was clear he recognized her, but instead of backing off, he doubled down. "You think being famous gives you the right to trespass?" Keanu stepped between them, eyes calm, yet unblinking. "We're not here to argue," he said. "We're here because a child needed help." The man's face turned red. He paced in small, angry circles like a caged dog, muttering curses under his breath. Then he looked at Martha again. "I want the rest of my land cleared by next week, or I'll bring the sheriff with the papers. And if I find so much as a flower pot on my side, I'll bulldoze the whole thing myself." With that, he stormed back to his truck, slammed the door, and peeled away, throwing dust into the air behind him. When the sound of the engine faded, Martha's face crumpled. "I didn't know. I thought everything was mine," she whispered. Keanu put a hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault. Sometimes people write their own rules and hope others are too kind to fight back." Eli looked at them both. "Are we in trouble?" Keanu knelt in front of him. "Not with us." But the situation wasn't simple anymore. They couldn't just leave and forget. Not now. Not with a child caught in the middle, a recovering mother on her way, and a bully with half a legal claim looming like a storm cloud. Sandra took out her phone and made a call. "I know someone in the city, real estate lawyer. If there's a loophole in his claim, they'll find it." Martha looked overwhelmed. "I don't have money for legal stuff." "You don't need it," Sandra said softly. "We're not going to let him scare you." Keanu nodded in agreement. Then, from down the road, a slow-moving vehicle appeared. It was a battered hospital shuttle, old and loud, with its front bumper held on by duct tape. It pulled into the gravel and stopped. The side door creaked open, and Janet stepped out. She was pale. Her body moved slowly, still healing. But when she saw Eli, her face lit up like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Mama!" Eli cried, running to her. They hugged for a long time, neither saying much, just the soft sound of tears and heartbeats between them. Martha helped her sister, inside. Keanu and Sandra stayed quiet, standing near the car. "We should go," Sandra said gently. "Give them space." Keanu looked at the sky. The sun was dipping below the horizon now, painting the clouds in streaks of gold and violet. "Maybe," he said, "but I think we've just stepped into something bigger." Sandra tilted her head. "You mean the land fight?" "That too," Keanu said. "But mostly, something deeper, like the world pulling threads together for a reason." She smiled. "You and your poetic instincts." But she felt it too, the way things kept happening, one after another, not just by chance, but by design, as if they weren't just walking into situations but being called into them. Keanu's phone buzzed. It was a message from someone he hadn't spoken to in years, a woman named Clarice, a journalist who ran a small kindness-focused blog and had once written about Keanu's quiet donations to children's hospitals. Her message read, "Is it true what I saw online? You and Sandra helped a boy and saved a house from fire? Please tell me it's real. I want to feature it, not for clicks. Just to remind people the world still has good in it." Keanu stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed one word back. Real. What none of them knew was that Clarice's article, published just hours later, would go viral. But not in the usual way. It wouldn't be a gossip piece or a celebrity headline. It would be a movement, a spark, the beginning of something unexpected and beautiful, because sometimes a walk through the street leads you to a boy. Sometimes that boy leads you to a broken home. And sometimes that home leads you to change a town forever, but only if you don't walk away. And Keanu Reeves never walked away. The ripple of one kind act, the next morning, the sun rose over the quiet town like it had always done. Birds chirped over telephone, Wire's dogs barked in distant backyards, and for most of the town it was just another Monday. But at Martha's house, something had shifted. The fire had scarred the land, but not the spirit inside those walls. What remained was not ash, but warmth. Inside, Janet was propped up in a soft chair, wrapped in a wool blanket, sipping tea. Her face still looked pale, her movements weak, but her eyes were alive again. Eli sat beside her on the floor, drawing in a notebook Keanu had given him the night before. His pencil moved slowly, carefully sketching shapes of people standing in front of a burning shed. Above them, he drew a figure with a cape. He didn't say it was Keanu, but he didn't have to. Sandra had stepped out early to pick up breakfast, for everyone. And Keanu stood on the porch with Martha, watching dew glisten on the grass. His expression was thoughtful, but his posture, relaxed. Like someone who wasn't there to save the day, just to be part of it. "You know," Martha said after a long pause, "I thought this land was my second chance. I thought moving my sister here would give us all a new start. But now, I'm not sure what I've done. That man is dangerous, and I don't even know if I can legally keep this place." Keanu nodded slowly. "Sometimes it's not about what you own, it's about who you protect." Martha turned to him. "But I'm not like you. I don't have money, or power, or you have heart," he interrupted gently, "and that's more powerful than you know." Before Martha could respond, a white SUV pulled up. Out stepped a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a confident stride. She wore no makeup, carried a leather satchel, and looked like she hadn't slept in a day. "You must be Martha," she said, offering her hand. "I'm Valerie. Sandra sent me." Martha blinked. "The lawyer?" Valerie smiled. "The very one." They stepped inside, and soon the living room became a war room of paper and conversation. Valerie pulled out maps, printed documents, and highlighted copies of old land agreements. She read aloud with a voice full of fire and precision. "Here's the trick," she said. "When your brother bought this land, the former owner, that man who showed up, attached a clause that stated he retained ownership of the utility shed and surrounding 10 feet. But what he didn't include were updates filed with the county after the sale. Those updates, which he probably thought were just bureaucratic nonsense, actually nullify the clause." Martha leaned forward. "You mean he has no legal claim to any of it?" Valerie confirmed. "You own this. The house, the shed, even the fence line he threatened to tear down." Martha's hands shook as she covered her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, but not from fear this time, from relief. Keanu sat quietly, listening, watching. His presence wasn't loud or demanding. It never was. It was steady, calming, like a lighthouse that simply exists to guide, not to be thanked. But the world outside wasn't done reacting. By noon, Sandra's kindness and Keanu's actions had gone far beyond what they imagined. The article Clarice posted, titled, He Gave a Boy a Ride, Then Stayed to Save a Home had reached over 2 million views. Not because of celebrity drama, but because the world was starving for real stories. The kind where goodness wasn't filtered through fame, where hearts showed up uninvited and stayed unannounced. Sandra returned with breakfast and a stack of letters in her hands. "They were at the front gate," she said. "Someone's been dropping them off." Martha looked, confused. "Letters?" Sandra spread them out on the table. Envelopes, dozens of them, some handwritten, some typed. Inside were notes from people around the country. "Your story made me cry. I haven't seen my brother in 5 years. Today I called him. We lost everything last year, but seeing what you did for that boy reminded me we're not alone. Please accept this gift card. It's not much, but I want to help." Inside, others were small donations. Gift cards, $5 bills, grocery, coupons. Not because they were asked, but because people felt moved to act. Keanu quietly walked outside to breathe. He never liked attention, never sought it. But as he stood in the yard looking out at the burned shed, he understood something deeper. This was bigger than one boy, one fire, or even one family. This was about a world waking up. Then a familiar voice called from behind. "Keanu." He turned to see Eli walking toward him with a paper in his hand. It was his drawing, the same one from earlier. Now it was finished. In the corner, Eli had written something in big, shaky letters. "Thank you for not walking by." Keanu took the paper with both hands, studying it with quiet reverence. "I want to be like you when I grow up," Eli said. Keanu knelt down. "You already are. Stronger, actually." The boy looked down, unsure what to say. Then, without warning, he hugged Keanu, tight, sincere, and wordless. Keanu hugged him back, eyes closed. Across the field, the black truck returned. But this time it wasn't alone. Behind it were 3 other vehicles, and standing in the back of one was a local sheriff. The man in the flannel stepped out again. This time with a smirk. "You really think this is over?" he sneered. "We'll see what the law says about all this." Keanu stood up slowly, but this time he wasn't standing alone. Valerie stepped out with Martha. Sandra followed behind them. Even Janet, frail and limping, rose from her chair and walked outside, arm wrapped around Eli. The sheriff walked to the center of the yard. He looked at the man, then at Valerie. "I've reviewed the documents," he said. "This property, house, shed, and all, is fully owned by Martha Simmons. Your claim is invalid." The man's face twisted. "This is a setup." "No," the sheriff replied firmly. "This is the law." The man took one step forward, but Keanu stepped between him and the family once more. Not with anger, not with fists, just presence. And the man stopped. Not because Keanu was a celebrity, but because he was a wall. And the man had run out of things to climb. Finally, the man backed off, muttering curses, and drove away for the last time. The sheriff tipped his hat and left, and just like that, peace returned. But the ripple had only begun. The town that remembered how to care days passed, but the memory of that moment didn't fade. It grew. It traveled from one home to the next like a spark in dry grass. Only this fire didn't burn. It healed. The town, once quiet and divided by small fences and silent grudges, began to stir. People who hadn't spoken in years crossed lawns to talk. Neighbors began to wave again. Something had shifted, and nobody could quite explain why, but everyone could feel it. At the heart of it all stood Martha's home. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even freshly painted. The porch steps still creaked, and the roof had a stubborn leak near the chimney. But it became something more than wood and nails. It became a symbol, a place where strangers showed up. Kindness took root, and truth stood firm in the face of threat. Keanu and Sandra stayed for 2 more days. They could have left sooner, returned to their busy lives, to scripts and contracts and agents waiting on the other side of the country. But they didn't. Not yet. Not while there was still something unfolding. Something sacred. On the 3rd morning, Keanu woke early. He stepped outside with a mug of black coffee. the steam rising like a soft cloud against the dawn. He stood on the porch barefoot, his hair slightly messy, his face relaxed but alert. Down the road, something was happening. People were gathering, cars parked along the gravel shoulder. Bikes leaned against fences. Children held balloons. Someone had brought folding chairs, others brought pots of food. And in the center of it all was a long table covered in a white cloth. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't a parade. It was a potluck, organized not by a mayor or a committee but by regular folks who had read the article, watched the video, and decided they were done being spectators in a world that needed their hands. Martha stepped outside, beside Keanu. She was still in her slippers. "What is all this?" she whispered, eyes wide. Keanu smiled slowly. This is what happens when people remember who they really are. Within minutes, the yard became a gathering place. Kids played tag beneath the trees. Elderly couples sat on folding chairs, sipping sweet tea and smiling at one another. A group of local musicians brought their guitars and started to play soft tunes that made the air feel lighter. Sandra arrived a few moments later, arms full of fresh bread and cookies from the town bakery. "They wouldn't let me pay," she said, shaking her head with a laugh. "They said it's the least they could do." Janet, still recovering but stronger now, sat on the porch with Eli beside her. Her eyes were full of quiet tears. Not from sadness, but from something she hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Then something remarkable happened. An older man stepped up onto the porch steps and cleared his throat. He was tall and thin, with silver hair tucked under a veteran's cap. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, not from fear but from weight. "I live 3 houses down," he said, "and I've been alone since my wife passed 4 years ago. I've spent more time talking to my television than to people. But when I read about what happened here, when I saw that man try to take what wasn't his and saw how y'all stood together, I remembered that this town used to be something. We used to look after each other. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for waking us up." There was silence, then applause. Real, raw, heartfelt applause. Others stood up after him. A young woman who ran the animal shelter, a teacher from the elementary school, even a few teenagers, who admitted they didn't know how to help before, but now they did. They spoke about starting food drives, fixing up old homes, checking on elderly neighbors. One man offered free legal help for anyone being harassed over land claims. Another pledged to donate tools and labor to rebuild the shed that burned down. It wasn't a single act of heroism that caused this. It was the chain, the boy, the ride, the fire, the confrontation, the truth, the stand. And at the center of that chain were 2 people who didn't try to lead. They simply didn't leave. As the evening sun painted the yard gold, Keanu sat cross-legged on the grass beside Eli. They shared a plate of baked beans and cornbread, talking about nothing in particular. Just stars and old cars and favorite ice cream flavors. It was the kind of conversation that most would overlook, but for Eli, it meant everything. "You?" "No," Eli said, glancing sideways. "I used to think people didn't care." Keanu nodded slowly, chewing before answering. "Sometimes it feels that way, but most people do. They just forget how much it matters." Eli looked around at the yard full of life and smiles. "Do you think this will last?" Keanu looked at him, his eyes deep and calm. "It can, if people keep choosing it." Meanwhile, Sandra was standing near a small group of kids showing her their paintings. One little girl had drawn a picture of a man standing in front of a burning shed, his arms wide, his shadow long and tall behind him. "Is that a superhero?" Sandra asked. The girl giggled. "No, that's Keanu. My daddy says he's like a walking hug." Sandra laughed. "That's actually perfect." As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, someone lit a fire pit. Songs were sung, marshmallows roasted, stories shared. The kind of evening that sticks in memory like a warm handprint on the soul. Keanu stood near the edge of the yard, watching the scene unfold. Sandra joined him, handing him a cup of tea. "You think they'll remember all this?" she asked. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it won't be about remembering. Maybe it'll just become who they are. She nodded thoughtfully. Funny how it all started with one walk down a city street. Keanu chuckled. No such thing as just a walk. Not anymore. Behind them, a boy's laughter echoed, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. This wasn't just a story anymore. This was the seed of something bigger, and it hadn't finished growing yet. The kindness that echoed across the world. The stars came out slowly that night, shy at first behind wisps of drifting clouds. But as the fire pit crackled and soft music hummed through the air, they revealed themselves, one by one, twinkling gently over the little town that had, without warning or announcement, become the heart of something far larger than itself. Martha's backyard was filled with people who just a week earlier had barely looked up from their routines. Now they sat side by side, shared food from the same tables, and exchanged stories, like old friends reunited after years apart. Somewhere between the smoke of grilled corn and the scent of blooming jasmine, a new kind of community had been born. Keanu Reeves stood near the back of the crowd, watching. He didn't speak much that evening. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. It had never been about the spotlight for him. It was about the silence after, the feeling left behind in the spaces people rarely notice. He watched Eli play a makeshift game of tag with 3 other kids, his laughter bursting into the air like firecrackers. He watched Janet rest on a lawn chair, surrounded by women who had come to know her not as a charity case, but as a sister. Sandra came to stand beside him again. She was quiet for a long while before she said softly, "This isn't a moment anymore. It's a movement." Keanu looked over. "You feel it too?" She nodded. "It's not just here, it's everywhere." She was right. That same night, across the country, people were gathering in small corners of their own towns. A cafe owner in Ohio offered free meals to anyone who needed them, no questions asked, because he read the story and remembered his own childhood hunger. In Texas, a group of teenage girls started a fundraiser to help pay off strangers' hospital bills. In New York, a city bus driver stopped to help a homeless man and didn't realize someone had recorded the moment, captioning it simply, "Keanu's kindness is contagious." And overseas, in a quiet village in South Korea, a retired teacher who hadn't left his house in months walked to the school down the road and donated all his books to children who couldn't afford them. Every act traced back to a story, and every story led back to a street, and 2 people who chose to stop walking and start helping. But Keanu wasn't thinking about any of that in the moment. He was thinking about Eli, about how a child's quiet hope had somehow awakened something long sleeping in the hearts of so many. "I used to think," Keanu said finally, his voice slow and thoughtful, "that change came from people in power, from governments, leaders, big voices. But now I think maybe it starts in whispers." Sandra leaned her head against his shoulder. "The kind you hear when you actually listen," she said. They stood there for a long while as the stars brightened above, watching the world unfold in small, beautiful pieces. The next morning, before the town even woke, Keanu and Sandra packed their things quietly. No big announcement, no cameras, just 2 bags and 2 hearts ready to walk the next street. But as they stepped outside, they saw something unexpected. The townspeople were already waiting. Not all of them, just a few. A teacher, the vet, a child holding a drawing, a woman with a fresh pie, the sheriff with his hands respectfully folded. They didn't want autographs. They didn't ask for selfies. They just wanted to say thank you, not for being famous, not for saving a house, but for reminding them what they were capable of. A quiet man stepped forward. He held a small wooden box. "We made something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We thought maybe you could carry it with you." Keanu opened the lid. Inside was a simple carved token. On it, burned into the grain, were the words "Start with 1." Keanu nodded slowly, deeply moved. "We will," he said. Sandra squeezed the woman's hand, and without further ceremony, they walked down the street together. No cars, no noise, just the soft sound of footsteps on gravel echoing gently in a town now awake. And as they disappeared into the early light, something lingered behind them. Not just the story, not even the miracle of what they had done, but the seed of a new idea, that kindness wasn't a performance, it was a promise. And sometimes, all it takes to fulfill that promise is to stop walking long enough to see who's been left behind. The boy, the fire, the truth, the fight, the people, the ripple, all of it began because someone didn't walk past and the world never forgot it.